which is a... All right, we're now recording. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, which is a virtual innovation fair. We're looking at technologies for real-time monitoring. My name is Gina Lucarelli. I'm the team leader for knowledge and innovation at the UN Development Operations Coordination Office. We service the UN Development Group, which has 34 UN entities working on sustainable development together. I'm really thrilled that we've got with us our colleagues at the Bright Front Group who've really done the heavy lifting and organizing this webinar. We're joined by Rose Schumann and Mita Paramita, who are both partners in the Bright Front Group. Bright Front Group works on research, strategic and operational planning, incubation, and scaling. I think many organizations in the UN are working with them. And we're really thrilled that we did some scheming around the Sustainable Development Summit in September, where we started to think, well, wouldn't it be great to get a few different groups online and exchange experiences on the kinds of technologies that help us with real-time monitoring. So we will be hearing from today colleagues from Spatial Collective, Primož Kovačić. Once we get him online, we're having a little technical difficulties there, but we're good. Then we've got Aditeshwar Seth from VAANI, and then we'll hear again from Rose and Mita on Question Box. They are the Rose is the co-founder, and Mita is the operations lead for Question Box. And then we've got Andrew Schroeder, who will talk about UAVIATORs. I think we should, or we will have my colleague Marc Lepage. No, we do have Marc online, who is UNDP's Knowledge and Innovation Advisor for Africa. So Marc will serve as my co-moderator, and feel free to join in and respond on any of the points raised here. Just to offer a little bit of background. Oh, hi, Marc. I've unmuted you, so you're good, or you should be. So just a bit of background here. In the UN Development Group, we've been learning that monitoring activities are much better when they're more frequent than annually based, and more subnational than only at the national level. Not all of these frequent or real-time monitoring methods need a technological solutions, but because it's possible to use administrative data or survey data if you're strategic about what data you're looking for. But what we know is that technology makes real-time monitoring easier, faster, and more importantly, it makes it possible to measure things that wouldn't otherwise be measurable via regular surveys and administrative data. Things like aerial views, even issues on perception data, on corruption or public accountability issues. These are things you wouldn't be able to measure normally, so we're very keen to make use of the technologies available to measure these kinds of things. So today we'll take a technological focus in this virtual innovation fair. I'm going to hand back over to Rose and Mita, who are going to guide us through this this tour of 4 different innovations out there. So let me then hand over to you, and we'll plan, if we don't have Primož on the line yet, we'll plan just to start with VAANI instead of Spatial Collective. So over to you, Rose and Mita.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gina, and also Patrick, who's organizing the tech, as well as Marc and everyone else who made this webinar possible.
Hi, everyone. This is Mita. Happy to be here.
Yep, she's also co-organized many of the attendees. Anyway, from Bright Front, we're really pleased to be here to curate this selection of groups, which is each doing such unique and path-breaking work in development and real-time information collection. We also want to thank the audience for attending, and we hope that this provides some good learning and initiates some new ideas for you for programs and discussion internally. And if any of these organization approaches pique your interest, we really encourage you to note down their emails during their presentations and reach out for more information, as each one is doing really tremendous work. For the audience, as Gina noted, we are the curators wearing our Bright Front Group hat but we run a project called Question Box, which you'll hear more about. Lastly, we'd like to thank our colleagues at Spatial Collective in VAANI and the UAVIATORS for joining us today. We've all wanted to collaborate together for such a long time, and it's great to have this opportunity now. So without further ado, it sounds like we're starting with VAANI. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so. We'll still try and reach out to Primož. But just, if you don't mind, can I add a technical note that I should have said at the beginning before we begin?
Yes,
just to say we are recording the session, so for reference, that's always good to know. And if there are questions, what I would suggest is colleagues write them in the chat box. If you can put in brackets the country you're working in and the organization you're working in, that helps us because we can only see your name, so it gives us a little context. So just feel free to jot down your questions sort of as we go, and we'll open up for a Q&A session after we've heard from all the colleagues on the panel.
That's a great point. Terrific. So I guess I'll go ahead and introduce Adi Seth from VAANI. VAANI is a social enterprise based in India, working in the space of building information and media sharing platforms for underserved populations in rural and remote areas, who often tend to be poorly literate and hence non-users of the internet or digital technology. They have pioneered the use of voice-based communication with these users, and we'll talk about Mobile VAANI, which is a bottom-up media platform for these next 5 billion users around the world. And without much further ado, I guess, Adi, it's you.
Thanks, Rose, and I guess it's good morning for all of you over there. Oops, what happened over here? Okay.
So apologies, we didn't ask you. We have the presentation here, or you can run it from there. Which would you prefer? Oh, we've got your screen here. Okay.
Okay, I can. If you can see my screen, then I can present from here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you see the screen?
Yep, we've got it. We've got the first slide there.
Okay, awesome, great. So I'm now on the second slide, and these are the users that we want to work for. So just to give more context, right? What we're trying to do, and let me see if I can make this full screen. Can you see this still?
Yep, we've got it. There's some typing going on there. I don't know if that's you or another colleague.
Right. No, that's not me. I'm actually trying to get the webinar control panel off the screen, but somehow it's not going away.
It's okay. We can't see it. We can only see your slide.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Awesome. Awesome. Great. So great. So what we're really trying to do over here is that the context is that remote and rural areas in India and in much of the other developing part of the world, we're talking about users who are not very literate. They definitely haven't used the internet before, and most of them are unlikely to come online anytime soon, because either the internet itself is sparsely available, not of good quality, or they can't afford smartphones or internet data packs. And so what are some of the information needs of these users, right? So for example, we've shown like 3 sets of users over here. Farkeshwar Mehto right at the top, he's actually a smallhold farmer. And the government keeps announcing all sorts of subsidies for agricultural schemes, but there's no dissemination mechanism for this. They might run ads in newspapers, but these people can't read newspapers. They would run TV ads, but again, television and radio penetration in some of these areas we're working is almost 20–25%. So, so there are serious gaps in actually the information reaching to these people. Similarly, there's a big change happening. Girls are getting educated, they're coming out of the typical patriarchal society that's been around. but again, they can really inspire each other, but there are no strong mechanisms for them to share information about scholarships, get inspired from other girls who've actually risen out and changed their lives. Similarly, there's college students, very enthusiastic, they want to grow, they want to do new things. But again, they don't have access to good mentors, people who can guide them, people who can give them career counseling. They also want to express themselves through poetry and other mechanisms. But again, the avenues that they have are very limited. So what we've actually been doing over here is trying to use mobile phones to see if we can cater to this population, because mobile phones indeed have a very high penetration. Like I said, TV and radio penetration might be 20-25%, but mobile phone penetration even in rural areas is as high as 65% in the parts of central India that we're working. But again, we've heard the whole term behind of mobiles for development, but again, we really haven't seen any large initiatives which have scaled up, and there are good reasons for it. Because, well, first of all, even if you build some interesting services on mobile phones, there's a problem that how do you market these services? How do you tell people in the first place that these sort of services exist? Because again, these are media dark areas, so it's not like we can advertise in newspapers or television or radio to inform people about it. So there's a big distribution and marketing challenge over here to publicize any of these services. Plus, even when you start providing services, it's hard to make sure that good information is being regularly supplied on some of these forums. So the institutional linkages often tend to be broken. And it's typically a result of just poor systems in many of these places. So in agriculture, for example, people try to link it up with agricultural universities, but there's not been any very strong successes over there, and it's been largely because the faculty or other people at the university, they have many other things to do. So you know that sort of a thought through initiative has been missing. So what I'll come back to this. What we are trying to do is we've actually managed to solve many of these problems, and we're running Mobile VAANI, which is a very large scaled up initiative now. And the way it works is we actually use IVR systems, interactive voice response systems. If you're not familiar with IVR, this is typically the kind of technology you encounter when you call a call center, right? And you get this automated prompt saying press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press 3 for this, and so on. So we've actually built applications on top of IVR which are interactive. The way this particular application works is that it's an information access and sharing medium for the people. They and it's free for the people, so they actually don't pay to call. They just give a missed call to the server, which means that they call the server, but the server cuts the call and sends them back. And incoming calls are free in India, so which means that people actually don't have to pay for any of this. And over this call, they can listen to information which has been recorded, or they can record information. And this is a very, very interesting primitive, because although it's very simple, but it's found many use cases. So for example, people can call and they can record questions that they might want to ask on agriculture. Other people can call, they can listen to these questions, and they can then try to answer these questions. Or similarly, if there's a local news or some sort of a political event which is being talked about, people can then comment on it, and it can actually evolve into a discussion. So, so this very basic primitive has actually been very successful. We started Mobile VAANI in 2013, and since then we've got more than 1.5 million users who've used this. And user interest is very high on the platform. People spend almost 9 minutes on average listening to content over the phone call, and user retention is pretty high at 70%. So a person who's called for the first time, 70% of them continue calling further into the system. And we get anywhere on average between 10,000 to 30,000 calls a day on the system. So I spoke about the problem of distribution, that how do we tell people about the system in the first place. So that's where we've done a lot of innovation as well. And this is other than the technology which is on IVR and which therefore becomes accessible even to poorly literate people. This actually is another very major innovation because of which the platform has reached this scale. So we actually have our own team of community mobilizers. Our staff then in turn works with a large network of community volunteers, and we recruit volunteers from diverse walks of life. Some of them are women who are community health workers, some of them are school teachers, some of them are reporters and stringers with regional media, local media. And what basically happens is that we train these people, and their main responsibility is to publicize the platform among their communities. So a community health worker, when she's meeting different families, advising them on seasonal diseases or maternal health, she also tells them about this platform, that over here you can get lots of different types of information. Similarly, a farmer who might be a volunteer will tell other farmers about the system. And we've actually got this model working very nicely. The volunteers are also incentivized. We have a small financial stipend which we also give to the volunteers, and it's actually pro rata based on the amount of usage they're able to generate from their area. It's not a lot of money. It's anywhere between $10 to $15 a month. So it's not a lot of money because we don't expect these people to be working with us full time. And the idea is that they continue doing what they are doing, but in addition, they also are able to top up their income through this method. So this has been quite successful. These are just some pictures showing how we run many of these community mobilization workshops to train local volunteers and journalists to be a part of the platform, and they then go out and publicize the platform to many other people. So this is it's a completely offline mechanism of user acquisition that we have going over here. The third part, which again is a big reason why the platform brings in such high user retention, is the content, because ultimately the content has got to be exciting and engaging. And there's largely two types of content that we have. One is content which has been contributed, either recorded by our own team or brought in by the volunteers. And over here, one silver bullet that we found is that of hyperlocal news. People have a lot of demand for hyperlocal news. So what we train our volunteers to do is to get networked in the right places so that they can get good quality news, and they then call and record this news on the platform. We also do recordings of headlines which we pick up from the daily newspapers. And so this is one type of content. When you call the system early in the morning, then the first couple of messages on the IVR are on news. And then there's a separate channel also for news. Similarly, we've built mechanisms for entertainment-oriented content. And over here, the interesting twist is that we don't create all this content ourselves, but we get users to contribute. So for example, we created this program which Bole Dil Ki Baat, which roughly translates into straight from the heart, telling stories straight from the heart, which actually encourages people to recount nostalgic memories. So things like first time you went into a movie hall, what was your experience like? First time you went into you traveled somewhere by train, and people then start contributing messages. So they would leave messages about their experiences, and we curate the messages and then we publish them out. So through this model, essentially what's happening is that the content, it becomes very, very local and contextual for the people. And that's one big reason. And plus, they get to hear their own voice, in the sense that actually their own voice and also voices of other people like them. So this is a, excuse me, this has received a lot of appreciation also from the users. So basically these three things put together, the technology, which is quite appropriate for people in this context, plus the whole distribution model through offline acquisition, user acquisition, and the content processes. These three things actually form the core of Mobile VAANI. And I'll very quickly take you through the kind of impact that this produces. Um, uh, so on the medium, now that we have so many people calling in on a regular basis, that basically gives us an opportunity to also expose them to other kinds of social development programming. Over here we call them campaigns. So we've done campaigns on a wide variety of topics, so things like very hard topics, things like early marriage, domestic violence, gender equality, which are otherwise not talked about in public. But what we do is we get discussions started on these themes. And again, we do it in the same way that on campaigns on early marriage, we start asking questions to people that why do you think early marriage happens in your village, and then they start reverting. So somebody might record a message saying that it happens because of dowry. Somebody else might say it happens because, well, I don't have money to educate my daughters. And again, when these comments can be heard by other people, they then further comment on these things, and that really translates into a conversation, which we believe is very powerful to create behavior change. That you're actually not treating the users as passive listeners, but you're actively engaging them in a conversation. So in the same way, we've done several even accountability-oriented campaigns where we collected data on the quality of health facilities in some of these areas, and so it also worked as a means of crowdsourced data collection. And many of these reports were then carried by the regional media, and that put in a lot of pressure on the authorities to fix things. So we very soon after this campaign, we got lots of testimonials from people saying that the quality of care they were getting from the health facility had significantly improved after the campaign. Another kind of an impact which happens is just empowerment itself, where when people and even women, when they're recording messages on the platform and which are being heard by thousands of other people, it gives them a significant feeling of empowerment, and it also alleviates their status in their own local community. Another very strong mechanism is by enforcing local accountability. So this is really a media platform where if somebody calls and talks about a problem or a corruption report, and because it's being talked about in an open public forum, that partly because of a fear of escalation, there have been many cases where problems have gotten solved. In some other cases, our team interfaces directly with the government officials and conveys grievances to them, which then become a part of the regular process, where there's a grievance ID which is allocated, and that then gets redressed. So in that way, there's been many cases where very often through no action by us, problems have been reported on the forum and they've gotten solved. Sometimes by proactive action by us, many of these problems also get solved. So again, it's just about, and these things actually also have a very strong word of mouth effect, because especially if some issues are getting solved, it really improves the credibility of the system in the minds of the people. They begin to trust it more, they begin to respect the social cause, which is the real motivation behind platforms like Mobile VAANI. And that again serves as a way for us to build a better trust with our users. Finally, the other way in which very strong impact happens is by forging partnerships with strong partners. So for example, we've got partnerships with some very strong local NGOs, and we ensure that if people ask questions, those questions actually get answered. If people file grievances, those grievances actually get redressed. And so that way, it's really about trying to run a very tight ecosystem with good partners on board, so that the users don't lose confidence and actually things are getting done. And I think I'm close to running out of time. So very quickly, I'll tell you that from a sustainability perspective, what we try to do is Partly we get paid through by running sponsored campaigns on social issues, where the funds largely come from NGOs or donors who want to run these campaigns. We're also building advertising onto the platform so that when people are spending time listening to content, in between we can place advertisements. And we can actually, because we can measure everything in terms of how many people heard the ad and for how long they heard the ad. So we can really bring in the equivalent of digital marketing over here. So our pricing is based on number of impressions and number of clicks on the ads. So I'll actually skip this. We've done campaigns for several different types of customers, tractor companies, e-commerce companies, even social media companies who are looking to get into these markets. And we're now also trying to build paid services where users may actually pay for helping students prepare for competitive exams for jobs, for example, where over the IVR we can build up their thinking and reasoning skills. Similarly, we're working on a product for marketplace literacy, which can actually teach entrepreneurs how to start a small local business. And so I'll stop now just to say that the company which actually started, VAANI is the name of the parent company which started all this. Mobile VAANI is that product, and very recently we've actually merged with another company which is a spin-off business unit from a global VAS provider called OnMobile. And this merger has really made us even stronger in terms of our capability to deliver large projects, in terms of the infrastructure that's available with us. OnMobile works in over 50 countries, and that actually gives an opportunity for us to replicate also much of this work in different geographies. So I'll stop now, and we can take questions now or later. Anything is fine. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Adi. This is Rose, and thank you so much for this tremendous presentation. It's been incredibly informative, and we really hope that the audience has benefited a lot as well from learning about your very innovative platform and its mechanism to reach very rural populations on their terms. It's really quite a unique and effective manner to engage with these sorts of populations. So I'm sure everyone has learned quite a lot. My understanding is that we're going to save all the questions until the end. Just checking to see, is that correct? Or whether Mark has any comments.
Yes, that's
no
fine.
comment at this point, thanks.
All right. So shall we move to our next presentation?
Yes, with one caveat that we know Primrose is called in, and it's a weird thing. We can't find the button to unmute them. So I don't know, Primrose, if you, this is Primrose Kovacic from Spatial Collective. Can you, if you speak, can we hear you? Let's test.
Hello?
Yes, fantastic. Okay, excellent. So what we'll do is we'll project your slides from here, and then we'll just, if you can just give us a signal when we should change from slide to slide.
Sounds good. Oh, so you hear me?
Yep. Yes, we hear you pretty much. Good to hear you. While we're loading up your slides, let me just give an introduction. Primoz is one of the co-founders of Spatial Collective based in Nairobi, Kenya, and they are a social enterprise that uses geographic information systems, GIS, for community development. And through data collection and visualization, Spatial Collective supports communities to identify available resources in their own communities and apply this knowledge in development initiatives. And I think that everyone's going to find this talk just as interesting as the previous one, as these are some really innovative and novel approaches to getting a sense of what's really happening on the ground and developing information and feedback loops that are pretty unique. So we're all very much looking forward to this presentation.
Thank you. Do you see my slides?
Yes, we see data. Question mark?
Yeah, so, yeah, very dramatic, I know. So anybody who works in development or emergency response or any related topic will know that good data is always hard to come by. And usually the communities which are most at risk or need the most help, there's the least data available on those communities. So if you move to slide number 2, this is Lamu County, for example, in Nairobi, in Kenya. It's a fairly marginalized country, relatively remote, and this is just a screenshot from Google Maps, and I will return to this map later. But as you see, there's not a lot of information there, despite the fact that there is various communities living there, from pastoralists, farmers, traders, fishermen, etc., etc. But data on these communities, remote communities, is usually very hard to come by. Same story can be found on slide number 3. This is just 3 kilometers from Nairobi city center, and it's an area called Mathare, which is Kenya's second largest slum. Approximately 100,000 people live there, but you wouldn't know that if you look at Google Maps. If you go to slide number 4, you're gonna see the same area but a satellite image, and you can see here is probably tens of thousands of people that live in this particular area. Slide number 5 shows an area of Mathare which was burned down. So not only the spatial information but also information relating to events, more real-time information is often missing. We did a research on fires in a particular area of Nairobi, and we found only 7 fires reported in the last 5 years in that particular area, even though the area was known for having a lot of fires. And the Red Cross, who has their own observers on the ground, reported almost 100 fires in the same time period, as opposed to the Kenya's biggest media house reported only on 7 fires. So if you move to the slide number 6, we found out that you cannot rely on outsiders to tell you what is going on in these communities, and we also believe that if you don't know what is going on, you cannot make informed decisions about how to best develop them. Slide number 7 will show you 2 community members watching their community, and we believe that people who truly understand the complexities of the problems are the people who experience them every day. And if you go to slide number 8, are you still following me?
Yes, I hear you.
Yep, it's going along.
Okay, so we are Spatial Collective. We support people and organizations in how to use available technologies to collect data and manage that data and own that data, and then how to make decisions about the most appropriate development. So our methodology ranges from identifying the relevant stakeholders, then training these stakeholders in community organizing for the right purpose or community mobilizing for a certain cause. We train them in using available technologies for either data collection, data management. We train them in creating outputs which are relevant for a certain cause, and then also in how to use that data and those outputs for advocacy purposes. So the easiest way to explain all this is if I talk about 2 examples very quickly. If you go to slide number 9, you're going to find a lot of trash. So this was the picture in Mathare. Trash represents a massive problem, despite the fact that there's dozens of organizations working on the problem. So we had to find out, for example, what's going on. Go to slide number 10, you'll see Kaka, who is a community member and an environmentalist who's been dealing with waste management all his life. So if you go to slide number 11, you'll see that we trained Kaka and his peers in GPS data collection, participatory methods and public opinion surveys. And slide number 12 will show you Thuo, who is one of the activists in Matara, collecting GPS data on all of the trash-related activities or problematic areas. And below you see a nice little map depicting that. The next slide, slide number 13, shows you a group of young people. So this is a self-organized group which collects trash, for example, but what the picture below is showing you is the network mapping. So we were interested into researching different governance initiatives. As you know, in the slums you have formal and informal governance, and we were looking at how different actors are connected or are not, or how they communicate or not, and we were just trying to figure out how the system, where the system collapsed. Slide number 14 shows you one of the members using a mobile phone to conduct a public opinion survey, and the map below shows you a randomly selected 1,000 households in Matara slum area. And for example, this map points to, so the green dots show areas which has waste collection, the red dots show you the areas which don't. And this shows you that even within a slum, there are differences between different areas. So some areas are better off than the others. So when you decide what kind of policies you're going to implement, it's important that you understand these differences. Slide number 15 shows you a community meeting. So after we collected all of this data, we brought everything together and we invited inside experts and outside experts to sit down together and figure out, so what is the data telling us and what is the most appropriate solution for this particular problem. And it turned out that it's fairly simple. So slide number 16 says a truck and a schedule. So we realized that there was dozens of groups who were dealing with waste management. However, they were not coordinating their activities. They were not sharing the information. So a truck and a schedule provided for all of them sort of a focal point, something that they could all strive towards, look towards together, like collectively. So we used then this solution, which is fairly simple but can have a massive impact on the lives of these people, to use a communication strategy and advocacy strategy around it. If we go to slide number 17 now, let me just briefly introduce you a different project which focuses on a rural area. This is again Lamu, the same area I was introducing before. And so Lamu is a remote rural area in northern Kenya or northeastern Kenya, and it's about to experience massive development. Kenya government wants to build a massive port there, so we were tasked to figure out how this port will affect the local population, the livelihoods of local people, but we didn't have a lot of data to work with. So if you go to slide number 18, obviously Lamu is known for the Swahili culture, the beautiful beaches, the indigenous populations. It's the birth of the Swahili culture, etc., etc. But recently has experienced a lot of turmoil. So Lamu is currently under curfew. And if you go to slide number 19, you will see, so that's another reason why we had to transfer the knowledge and why we couldn't go ourselves to collect data. So we trained people on the mainland and people on the islands in how to collect data. And if you go to number 20, slide number 20, you will see fishermen walking, sailing around, showing, the fish landing sites where they catch crabs, where they catch this or that, which creeks they use to sail, et cetera, et cetera. And we did the same exercise with pastoralists and with farmers and with all the communities living there. And then on the slide number 21, it shows you we aggregated all of these data sets into several multiple data sets. And slide number 22 shows you some of the outputs that we created. For example, the right map shows you on the conflicts that's been happening between different communities, pastoralists versus farmers, or fishermen versus farmers, or government versus farmers, or et cetera, et cetera. The left map shows you some of the areas which are going to be affected, how the fishermen are going to be affected by the construction of this port. And we did a series of about a dozen maps which pinpointed the potential conflict between the development and the livelihoods of communities. If you go to slide number 23, you should see, first of all, if you're watching full screen, a map of LAMU just from a Google print screen. And if you press once more, you will see how much data we were managed to generate. So you see a big mess of data, hopefully, and all of these data sets we generated in a couple of months, and all of them point to the potential conflict between the development and the livelihoods of communities there. Now, just to quickly wrap up, go to slide number 24, and you could see we can implement these methodologies in any setting. So the slide number 24 shows you we did a crime mapping, so more real-time data on collecting crime. So we created a small platform where people could log in and report it where crime is happening, and we could see spatial and temporal distribution of crime in certain communities. And number 25 shows you research we did into emergency hazard management. So how the communities and the cities dealing with emergency response in the informal settlements using same type of approaches and methodologies. And this is it from me. Thank you. Hope it made sense.
Thanks so much, Primož. This has been an incredibly informative presentation.
Thank you.
Excellent. So it sounds like we're ready to move on to the next presentation. But again, thank you. I think that these are some really innovative approaches and are really showing what can be done when you really work both with the community and appropriate technologies, but really looking at solving problems. So hopefully this is inspiring to a lot of people who are watching this webinar. All right, so we're going to move on to ourselves right now. Mita and I are the curators of this session as Brightfront Group, and as Brightfront we do consultancies with development agencies such as UN Global Pulse and UNICEF on many different topics, such as the new UNICEF mobile health global platform that we're currently helping design the products for a global launch over this year. But when we're not doing that, in this picture there's Mita and myself, so you have a face. That's about a year ago we were launching the National Ebola Hotline for Ghana, working with UNICEF and the Ministry of Health. When we're not doing that, we run a project called Question Box, and that's going to be the topic of this presentation. The wonderful folks in New York are going to control the slides, so if we could go to the next slide, that would be great. So to pull back a little bit, one of the real issues around real-time data is the importance of community resilience and resilience in the face of shocks and crises. And that's become a popular topic recently, as I'm sure everyone here knows. And one thing that really impacts the ability of a community to weather a crisis intact is how linked that community is, both internally as well as to external resources, because these are all different sources of help when things become unstable. Next, please. One thing that has become a topic of great discussion is the idea that in much of the world there is a lot of what you could call invisible populations. So the UN Secretary General's Independent Expert Advisory Group on a Data Revolution wrote these really stirring words, which is, never again should it be possible to say we didn't know. No one should be invisible. This is the world we want, a world that counts. And Question Box is an approach that's designed to work with the development sector to really tackle this issue. How can we link and connect communities so that they're stronger? And also, how can we get real-time information and feedback from the ground, from the actual participants, so that better monitoring and better decision-making can happen? Next slide, please. Question boxes are a very appropriate technology that are designed to be deployed in almost any development or crisis environment. The only restraint is there must be some GSM mobile phone signal as our system runs on the mobile phone network. What these are public call boxes that are points of help that are available right in communities where people live and work, so that services and information and feedback points can be made available to them anytime and anywhere they need it. The little dots are showing different ways you can arrange the question boxes. They can all be spread out in communities and all go to a central hub, for example, like an expert hotline. They can be in little clusters and all go to, say, a community health worker who then can feed back into other community health workers, or they can be all attached to each other. But it shows you that this is a really versatile and open platform that can be made to work across many different sectors, but all with the same purpose of giving easy access to information in spite of any of the challenges that populations may have with illiteracy, social inequality, or technology. The little cartoon at the bottom is an illustration that's used in Sierra Leone for the Sierra Leone National Ebola Hotline, where question boxes were put up in some very rural areas on the border of Guinea, enabling populations, even when they don't have phones or when the connection's bad and when their community is cut off because the roads don't work during the rainy seasons, it gives them a way to actually connect right in whenever they need to report something or get information. Next slide, please. So a little bit about us. We've been around since 2007 and have over the time been featured by many, many kind media sources, from the New York Times to the Times of India to the Telegraph and BBC and TED and the U.S. State Department and whatnot. But the whole purpose, the whole reason that we exist is that question boxes are meant to reach places like this location pictured below, and it should be user-friendly and accessible. The people that we want to help should not be doing work just because of technology. And the idea is that it's rapid and can be up in an afternoon. Next slide, please. So what we think about is question boxes are putting up an ad hoc and rapid community infrastructure that can reach into places that are deeply underserved and be done very quickly. So this is one of our early prototypes in which the question box was actually literally made out of a box, and this is in a slum outside of Pune, India. And the idea is, how do you show that you have a presence where people are, even if there's nobody there from your organization all the time? How do people know where to go for help? How do they report things going on? How do they know to get connections, information? In this case, this was an education service. So you can see in the lower part, there was a school for orphan children that had one of these, and it was an ability for them to get education, support, and help, especially in areas where there really were no libraries. The idea is that you can connect to a central hotline, or you can connect to local members of organizations like a community health worker or an agricultural extension agent, so that people can find out what are the resources in their area, because they might not be aware of what they can access. Next slide, please. So there's three different ways that question boxes can serve program needs and help communities. One is to do what we call direct linkages with the external world when we were talking about resilience at the beginning. Basically, how do we reinforce connections that vulnerable, rural, and marginalized and slum communities, or also actually refugee communities and minority populations that are hiding within a bigger population, how do they get more links to the external world? How can they find out about services and information? How can they get warnings? How can they provide alerts when things aren't working the way they should? That all reinforces resilience, and it's very rapid because it's very intuitive and very little training is required to get a community able to use this. The second way that question boxes have been used is to reinforce community self-sufficiency. So helping the community link better to the resources that are already in the region but not everybody will know about. And again, that's looking at how do you reinforce the effectiveness of, say, a community health worker network or other locally deployed resources that right now might have to focus on essentially walking from place to place, and a lot of kind of semi-unsupervised initiative taken on the part of the frontline workers. How do you connect directly to the frontline workers so that they know when there's a need somewhere in their catchment area and can begin to serve a bigger population in a more efficient way? And then the third way is, such as in Ebola, when there's a crisis, how do you throw up infrastructure really quickly so that communities have a way to set up feedback loops and also get rapidly changing information so that lives can be saved and crises not become bigger than they need to be. Next slide, please. So we're going to quickly go through a couple of examples. This is in Uganda, in Padere district. Here, question boxes were put up in small health clinics, small health centers, in a district that had no hospital. And there's an ad hoc local resilience effort that was made between a private actor and the local government to decide where do they deploy the one motorcycle ambulance in the entire region. So we see here a mother with a sick child calling in, speaking to the clinician who's asking triage questions and determining whether it is a good idea to send that one motorcycle out to her location. And since every box location is known, they know exactly where to find her and then decide whether it makes sense to bring her into the clinic and check on the baby. The baby was treated and is doing very well. Next slide, please. So if you can see, there's a lot going on this slide, but basically, if you look at the map, the little blue diamonds are the locations of the question boxes, and the triangles are the locations of hospitals or a bigger clinic. And you can see that basically most of Padere is completely unserved by any real medical infrastructure beyond small clinic levels. So if anybody has a critical case, there's nothing they can do until the system was deployed. So it enables the, again, government and the private partner to coordinate the use of that one motorcycle that can then pick up the most urgent patients and bring them to the appropriate place for care. Next, please. We've also done work in India, working to extend community health worker access to very large catchment populations to educate pregnant women about HIV and get them seen and tested. So they had maybe, I think, 30 outreach workers for a 500,000 person population. So they set up mommy-baby hotlines that are ways to attract and help women throughout, as well as connect them to their closest service provider. And below we see an example from the Ebola National Hotline in Sierra Leone, reaching out to very rural villages. Next, please. This is an agricultural project we did in Uganda, and again, this was very interesting as it went into a 3-person central hotline, was able to service 40 different communities in very rural areas across 2 different districts. And one thing that was very useful was that since all the data came in right away, you could immediately see that there were outbreaks and where they were located of banana and coffee diseases. So besides being able to help communities far away where they weren't going to get an agronomist, we were also able to really map and locate what was happening in real time and be able to then work with directing resources towards those communities and have a better sense of what was happening much earlier than would have been possible otherwise. Next, please. So basically, the purpose of Question Box is to support, extend, and reinforce the efforts of development and crisis programs. We really are specialized in helping you work with very marginalized groups that have any one of these characteristics, that they're hard or discriminated against, hard to reach, or their literacy is keeping them out of using an SMS solution, that they're migratory or unaccounted for, you don't even know who they are or where they are at any given time, or they, for whatever reason, really aren't able to properly access programs or services or feedback. So what Question Box does is it enables a program to put a route in a physical location that is a window to gain and exchange information. So it really allows one to multiply one's presence very, very rapidly. Again, these go up in an afternoon. And to really put a visible physical engagement point that is quite versatile to really reach and access those communities that maybe aren't accessible all the time. Next, please. So there's a few different ways that we work with organizations. We work across all sectors. One is total partnerships, in which we essentially manage everything end to end and extend and integrate very cleanly into your programs, but handle all of the details. The other extreme is programs that really wish to do it themselves. Then they can simply buy the kits and get a bit of technical support and launch these programs themselves. Or a third way is in collaboration with local NGO partners, in which we train and capacitate them to run and maintain this community level last mile system. Next, please. So, again, the whole purpose of doing this is to really be able to quickly and intuitively and equitably provide actionable real-time information from the ground in a way that's easy to set up, accessible for the users, and actually surprisingly cost-efficient. Won't get too much into it, but basically for a very small flat fee, each of these units' phone calls are completely free. So they can be used as much as the community wants to use them without any variation in the cost to run them, which is very useful. So unlike many other approaches, there is no cost that goes up with users. It really is a flat fee per place, and then you use a special phone plan that allows for infinite minutes every month, which is very nice. So it's a way to really let people talk and speak and listen in the way that's most natural to them, where they are, and get the information they need, and also provide you with a real window about what's going on. Next slide, please. So we again thank you all for participating and listening and spending some time with us. We'd love to keep that conversation going. If you have any questions, want to learn more, please feel free to reach out to either of us. I'm Rose, and Mita, the technology lead, is also available to answer questions. Anyway, thanks so much. And again, thanks to everyone in New York for this opportunity. And let's move to our next organization, which is also offering some very fantastic solutions. Thanks again.
Thank you, Rose and Mita. So, so Andrew from UAVIATORS is up next. We will give you the controls, as it were.
Yeah, great. And then while he's getting launched, Andrew is a lead at UAVIATORS, which is a global humanitarian network, and it aims to support the safe, ethical, and effective use of UAV, or otherwise known as drone, technologies for relief and development. And Andrew, will pass it over to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rose. Hopefully everyone can see my screen now. I'm going to talk to you, like Rose said, about UAVIATORS, a humanitarian UAV network. In case anyone, I think everyone should be familiar with what a drone is at this point, given how much they're discussed in the media, but just for a quick refresher, we're talking about small aerial robots, things like the DJI Phantom and up to the EB by SenseFly, which is a fixed wing system, and the DJI is a quad rotor system that carry small payloads that take pictures and increasingly can move things like small amounts of medical supplies or other lightweight materials. And we're pioneering connections for applications of these small aerial robots in relief and development situations. UAVIATORS was formed after Typhoon Haiyan, when my colleague Patrick Meyer was seconded by OCHA to work with response in Typhoon Haiyan, and began noticing in the information management unit that a number of organizations were already using UAVs, but nobody was aware of one another. There was very little interconnection. There was no guideline whatsoever for how these ought to be operated, what are set of concerns around safety. You can actually drop these on people's heads. We want to make sure that communities are informed, that there's a regulatory engagement. There's a lot that goes into UAV operations other than just sort of getting your vehicle in the air, and very little of that was going on. We began reaching out to a number of organizations in the humanitarian community, like what you see here, to start understanding what kinds of use cases, what kinds of interests they have, and began to formulate a network that linked then into as well the technology community. All of these organizations are on the board of UAVIATORS now, and are working actively to promote best practices throughout the humanitarian community, to be able to engage and inform about changes in the technology. It's a very fast-moving field, and have been really, I think, exemplary partners for looking at sort of private sector engagement across the spectrum. The particular activities that UAVIATORS engaged in are what you see here. We do trainings, guidelines, strategic projects, expert meetings, research, and then engagement with the media, all around effective, ethical, safe use of UAVs for humanitarian relief and development. I'm going to, the one I'll skip in the middle is strategic projects because I don't really have any time to do that, but just, you know, for the sake of understanding what kind of activity we engage in. We've done a number of trainings so far. This is a training that was done in Belgium with VAANI University, which is an aeronautical university in northern Belgium. We just completed a training at the NetHope Global Summit in Copenhagen, and worked on a training outside of Washington, D.C. With a group called Unmanned Experts that also had done a number of projects in Nepal. And the focus of these trainings is around understanding how to operate in humanitarian environments, so best practices for being able to deploy these safely, ethically, and effective in humanitarian environments. That includes the basics of flight, what makes a UAV fly, how does it, what are the just sort of essential physics, what are the sensors, and then on into things like policy and regulatory, which consume a lot of time in terms of permissions and the kinds of community engagements that need to take place. We've also been working on moving trainings out further into the field, and just recently completed an excellent workshop that took place in September with groups in Nepal. Our colleagues at Kathmandu University, Kathmandu Living Labs, and our private sector partners DJI and Pix4D, where we went out to the town of which is just outside of Kathmandu. As of September 2015, Tonga was still devastated, rubble not cleared, buildings obviously not rebuilt, and a lot of concerns about understanding the structural integrity of the infrastructure out there, so that effective planning could take place for how to rebuild Tonga. And we worked with a number of community members who in this case were engineering students at Kathmandu University, and then community disaster resilience leaders within Tonga, along with the cartographers at Kathmandu Living Labs, to be able to fly a number of UAVs around Tonga and generate orthorectified maps that at high resolution. So these were, what you see in the background is the Google map of that area, and then we were able to do the same area in 5-centimeter resolution, so you can really see a dramatic difference in the clarity of the imagery, and of course the currency of the imagery. So Google Maps is infrequently updated, and these are sort of as fresh as the previous day's flight. So having done that, we were able to engage the local community. We printed out base maps and did participatory GIS and worked with folks on identifying key points of interest, tagging those images, and really sort of working with the spatial data to be able to understand the development priorities, the rebuilding priorities in their areas. And that led to one of the first spin-offs from UAVIATORS, which is called Kathmandu Flying Labs, which is an institution that will persist. We're going back to Kathmandu in March to work with the same groups around fixed-wing mapping and payload delivery for medicines. And that's going to be a locally sustainable, locally driven organization that works on applications of UAVs for relief and development, specifically in Nepal and in the Kathmandu area. And these will be networked in many other cities around the world as we start to build out that strategy. Guidelines, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key issues in all of these deployments, from Typhoon Haiyan to Nepal to a range of other things around the world, has been sort of how should people behave in order to get the proper approval and to not run into trouble and not to cause more problems than they're solving when they bring this kind of technology into the field, which, you know, often rightly causes concerns, maybe suspicions by people who may not have been consulted. In Nepal, for instance, we had people that were groups that were flying UAVs that did not tell local communities what they were doing, and often you had communities that were imaged 3, 4, 5 times in a row. Nobody knew what was going on, and this caused a lot of backlash. So we developed, in conjunction with a number of other humanitarian agencies, a code of conduct and guidelines around community engagement and a number of other things, including most recently payload delivery, that's in the process of being formulated to put some shape and structure to this field. And you can get the code of conduct. It's an open, collaboratively written Google document that's available through the UAVIATORS website. Like I said, I'll skip strategic projects. Expert meetings are engagements of leaders in the field from the humanitarian community and the technology side and the academic community to bring together communities of practice to formulate how UAVs ought to be applied in humanitarian relief and development. And again, it's to track rapidly changing technology, the emergence of things like sense and avoid technologies, which allow UAVs to operate autonomously to avoid obstacles, changes in the kinds of payloads that can be carried, imagery that not only is high-resolution photos and video, but increasingly infrared and hyperspectral imagery, applications within agriculture, within disaster relief, and a number of other fields. Our most recent one was concluded at MIT Lincoln Laboratories in October, where we had participation from about 45 individuals that represented agencies from the Canadian government to MIT to UN OCHA, the Red Cross. I also work for Direct Relief, so I participate on behalf of Direct Relief as well. And then obviously the Rockefeller Foundation has been very supportive, and the UN was the host for our first experts meeting back in 2014. And that also allows us to convene, I think, one of the key gaps, sort of convene interest to fill one of the key gaps in this field, which is applied research. We hear a lot of discussion about UAVs and sort of what UAVs could accomplish. It's a very kind of sexy new topic, but there's very little work in the field that really kind of gets into methodologically rigorous examinations of what kind of difference UAVs make. So in conjunction with FSD, which is the demining organization based in Geneva, Switzerland, that's been leading a really terrific effort along with us to be able to compile case studies and track the kinds of projects that are working in this field around the world, as well as a number of other folks that you see up here have begun not just documenting what happens, but increasingly to put together an evidence base that can be referenced as people begin to develop sort of methodologically rigorous planning around UAV applications. We're tracking travel and laws in over 180 countries around the world. This is a wiki. It's not really possible for us as UAViators internally to do all of that research. So through the UAViators website, you can find a wiki to be able to look up the most recent information available on how to be able to effectively get technology through customs, the appropriate contacts, any kinds of regulatory problems that you may run into. Kenya, for instance, recently banned UAV technology altogether. The Kenyan Defense Ministry has banned it and pending a further review of how they can actually guarantee security and safety. That's not universally true, so there's a wide variety of different national laws that you need to be aware of if you're going to apply these kinds of technologies, and you can access that through the wiki. A terrific product that Patrick worked on with the New America Foundation on drones and aerial observation, which you can get through the New America Foundation site. And then I think one of the key roles that UAViators has been able to play as well is engaging with the media around how to tell the story of the benefits UAVs can have in the field, and to be very upfront about the limitations and the nuances. Again, this is a field which gets a lot of media attention, and often it focuses on the one or two cases where people do really stupid things, like fly their UAVs near an airplane and threaten a commercial airliner potentially just by mistake, or lose control of it and land it on the lawn of the White House. And that kind of backlash can affect all kinds of things. So being able to engage routinely with the media to be able to tell the story and to put that into the framework that I described earlier around communities of practice that are engaged in a number of different very impactful projects is, I think, one of the best ways that we can ensure that this space remains reasonably open in the future. So again, OCHA has been very supportive on all of this, and we would hope that everyone here, if you're interested, please go ahead and engage directly with us, and you can contact through uaviators.org. My email address is andrew@uaviators.org for UAViators related activities. And just one final word, this, like I mentioned, these are aerial robots. Robotics as a whole is starting to transition into something which has a great deal of promise and potential applications for humanitarian aid and development activities. And one of the things you'll hear about in the upcoming months is the transition of UAViators itself into a new organization called We Robotics. We Robotics is looking more broadly at the entire field of robotics applications and will continue to focus on UAVs. UAViators will become part of We Robotics. And if you're interested in learning more about that, again, email me at andrew@uaviators.org. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Andrew. That was really, really illuminating. Rose, are you there? Do you wanna say a couple words? Maybe not. Okay, we can't hear you, Rose or Mika. Not sure why. Oh gosh, did it auto mute you again? Let's just check. Actually, it doesn't even say you're on mic. Rose, Mita, are you there?
Yep, can you hear us?
Oh, okay, there you are.
Oh, great. Anyway, so this was a fantastic discussion. It really has been so illuminating, and thank you to all of our partners at VAANI, Spatial Collective, and UAVIATORS for sharing these really innovative approaches with all of us. It sounds like it's time to move to questions.
Yes, we have hit the end of the time for our webinar, but I would like to propose that if colleagues want to ask questions, let's, those are the presenters who can stick around for another 15 minutes, let's do that. That would be my proposal. So the best way to ask a question is just to write it in the question box, the chat box. That way we can see it and read it out and give you an idea. If you really want to speak, we can try and do the enabling of your mic, but sometimes there's a lot of echo and feedback which gets in the way. So Mark, do you want me to open your mic so you can come in here? I see your question. Go ahead and, yeah, go ahead.
Sure, thanks. Thank you to all the presenters. I thought this was very interesting and in a way gave a good overview on the different approaches, and it's a very diverse experience. So speakers, I don't know if you can see the quick questions that I've put down in the question box. Rose, can I say that? If you had to advise to the participants today on what they should be paying attention to when working in such an environment, doing that sort of initiative, and what to avoid, what would these two advice be? If we can do a quick round between the various speakers, unless of course other participants have other questions. Gina, over to you.
Great, thanks. Now I'll monitor the chat box here. I don't see anything else coming in. So why don't we turn to let's see who first. Let's start with the last first. Back to Andrew there. What would be your two pieces of advice to people who want to move in this area?
I'm sorry, my audio kicked out. Could you repeat the question again? I just got back online.
Yeah, sure, no problem. No, it's just if you could give two pieces of advice to all the people online who want to move in this direction, on what to pay attention to, what to avoid, what would this be?
Well, so I think the first would be to not try to reinvent the wheel, really. I think there's in all of the areas that we've talked about, there's I think innovation that's being built on top of a number of established technologies, and that includes even in which are pretty new, where there's quite a lot of work going on. So try to start with things that are pretty well established and figure out how to build sort of basically useful things. And I guess that leads to the second part, which is network as much as possible on this. So this is where we found that the real value in our case of UAVIATORS is not necessarily even just been creating new work products, but making sure that people are aware of one another and sort of connecting and making sure that those things that people are working on are broadly known. There's a tremendous amount of work going on out there, and it just gets lost really quickly if we're not sort of routinely in contact. So that would be my two pieces.
Some advice on coordination. That's always it's the perennial challenge. Absolutely, absolutely. But particularly as things are moving so quickly, it's fundamental. Do we have any advice from Primož? Want to jump in here?
Yeah, maybe you guys hear me?
Yes, we do. Go ahead.
Maybe just, well, there's a certain perception of, what development should look like. And I've been working in this field, especially in the field of technology for development for half a dozen years now. So I've seen technologies come and go. And, every year there's a new sexy thing out there, and then the next year something else, and the next year something else. So I would just advise maybe that well, what we've seen is that many organizations, however well-intended, they approach communities with a solution usually already at hand, and that solution is based on either the product that they sell or whatever they are offering, right? So I would just warn, from this type of approach. Take your time to understand communities well. Don't just rush in like a sheriff with a bulldozer. That's, I guess, my advice.
That's a great piece of advice, and that's a really, really good point. And that's maybe, that's in a way why we wanted to bring these two communities together. Those of us working inside the United Nations, who in most cases are based at the country level and have an ongoing presence there. They may not, they may have a closer tie to some of the communities in the sense of what's needed and not that they have the monopoly on that information, but just that, to connect these two communities, the tech community, with these great solutions, and the United Nations, so that we can bring this in where we think it's needed. But really, really good advice to listen first before offering your solution, however innovative. How about our colleagues at VAANI? Aditeshwar, are you there?
Yeah, so actually just to build up on the previous point, that, not just the technology there. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. We hear you perfectly.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. Great. Yeah, so, other than, the previous point that the technology design needs to be user-centric, one of our biggest learning was that the technology alone is not the solution, but the entire program needs to be thought through. So, for example, when we started Mobile VAANI, we of course started with just the technology, but we gradually realized that we had to invent many non-technical things as well as we went along. So all these interesting processes around content, and which only could come about if we remained in touch with our users. So we constantly kept interviewing them, kept making, did a lot of focus group discussions to understand what are the information needs of people, what really gets them kicked about things that they like. So that content part was important, and similarly, the whole community mobilization aspect, that then how do we build a model which is scalable? And these are completely non-technical things. The whole community mobilization part is really all about human resource management, motivating people, inspiring them, helping them resolve any interpersonal disputes. So those were some of the biggest learnings, that not only the technology had to be designed by being in touch with the community, but also other processes around adoption of the technology are just as important.
Absolutely, and this is a lesson that we learn again and again. Whatever the technology we're using or developing is, it's something I can definitely relate to as well. There's always this platform panacea kind of thinking. So it's really good to think of that side of it. So Rose and Mita, do you guys want to jump in here? What's your advice?
Sure. So first checking, you can hear us. Is that right?
Yes, it sounds like you're really far away from the mic or something.
Great. Well, I'll try to talk a little bit louder.
Perfect.
But, okay, super. So two quick pieces of advice that we've learned through some hard efforts over the years. One is to realize that when we're trying to reach populations, the levels of I suppose, for lack of a better word, empowerment and technology familiarity is very, very different even within the same community, and especially if you're looking at trying to reach and engage and help women and children and elderly people, as well as potentially populations who are from different language or ethnic groups, that, just to arc back on all these different points raised by the previous panelists, a one-size solution may not always work. And I think in particular, one cannot always assume that people have all the time access to their own mobile phone. Even though those levels are going up, the levels of literacy are actually not moving in the same way. And also you think about local language, Many languages don't text well either, so as well as the fact that people's SIM cards are changing all the time, and it's rather difficult often just to collect those numbers and keep on top of them. So it's important to think about what are the different ways that people can engage, and frequently one needs to rely on voice as well as, well raised by everybody else, having some strong roots in communities so that this is not an isolated intervention, but really part of a holistic system to engage with them. Which leads to one second point, which is the idea of reciprocity. Frequently, especially when trying to gather information, there's a lot of effort to go out and collect that information from populations, but not really considered how do you build a long-term relationship. And specifically what we think is important is the idea that if one collects information, one should also provide something of value back. So at Question Box, for example, the question boxes are natural places to collect feedback from populations about ground conditions, but it's really important to offer them something of value, either access to information, like some sort of medical information or education or agriculture that right now is difficult for them to access, or at least letting them know what their feedback will accomplish so that you're really building a nice circular dynamic that can have sustainability. Those are 2 points to bear in mind.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. This has been such a huge learning opportunity for, certainly I can speak for myself, and I can guess that my UN colleagues in the several countries that have been online, we had about 50 people online most of the time for this webinar. So maybe I'll just close it out with 3 takeaways on my side, and then we will send you all the recording in case you want to, relive this experience. First, I would just say a little bit about the data. I mean, for me, it was really illuminating to think about how important hyper-local data is for accountability purposes, and in terms of improving public services. And also the extra added value you get when you layer data, whether it's public opinion surveys or community watch efforts, and then adding GPS data to that, you can really get a better sense of where issues are and hopefully move towards, advocating a solution. I would also say my second point would be really that, it's really important and worth reiterating that I keep learning from you guys that the technological solutions are not really, putting the machines in charge in this disempowering way. In fact, it seems from what we've heard today that it's really the opposite. We're able to connect remote, underserved, even unserved areas and enable them and empower them. I really like the term inside and outside experts that Primrose used. This is really, it's very much about participation and just making that more possible, making empowerment and accountability more possible, not the other way around. And then finally, just one point that we are, within the United Nations, we are both excited about and challenged by the fact that the new Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals that the member states adopted in September, the focus is really on leaving no one behind. And many of us inside the system are worried in some ways that this has cost implications at a time when funding is often decreasing rather than increasing. But I think what we've learned here is really, these last mile systems, as Rose, I think you called it, are a great low-cost way to at least have coverage there in very remote communities. And it doesn't have to be that reaching the last mile and leaving no one behind has huge costs attached to it. So huge thanks to all of our speakers. Again, Spatial Collective, VAANI, Question Box, and UAVIATORS. And thanks to all of you for listening. We will we'll send out the slides and the recording to you soon.